If you see a worm in a bird's dropping, it probably already has a long-standing infection or a very serious worm burden. Larger worms, such as ascarids, can be visualized and are the most commonly seen worm for most bird owners. But a range of worms exists, and they vary in size, with many of them being microscopic and others living in the actual tissue. So don't rely on visually checking droppings for worms. Most likely you will miss them. Utilize a fecal egg count method if you are keen to keep an eye on the challenges your birds may be facing. Hygiene plays a huge role in keeping your birds healthy, and manure removal is an important part of that. Using composting floor methods, removal of or rotationally moving your birds to a new area can help reduce worm burdens. However, many of the parasitic worms utilize what is called a secondary host, or an indirect life cycle in which they use a prey species, like a worm, insect, or another animal, in order to complete its life cycle. Some worm eggs can live 1 to 2 years in the soil, making them very difficult to remove. So while hygiene is the best method in preventing some of the most common worms, it can't be relied on as the only method, especially in a free-ranging bird flock. Diarrhea is a clinical sign for a number of illnesses, including coccidiosis, fatty liver, infectious bronchitis, necrotic enteritis, stress, new feed ingredients, as well as a few others. Treating diarrhea without knowing what your bird has can lead to resistance towards the medication in many parasites, especially worms. Natural products can be good for many issues, but research is still needed to prove that they are effective in some cases. Garlic has had limited research papers into its effects on parasitic worms, and recent studies have found that it is not effective at reducing worm burdens. One paper from 1974 suggests that it could be effective, but the study has some issues with it, how it was run, and the follow-up studies seem to all conclude that garlic has no effect against worms. Diatomaceous earth continues to be used in small-scale farming and backyard flocks, even though research would indicate that it has no effect at reducing parasitic worm burdens. There have been a couple papers cited where there is some evidence that DE is effective in ruminants, and a few smaller papers have been published around this as well. However, a couple of the studies that show potential harm due to silicosis in humans as well as animals, and this product fails to meet the requirements. Withhold times for meat and eggs are used to prevent people from ingesting chemicals that are used in treating animals in the farming and food industry. Eggs are one of the great side benefits to having chooks, and so it's not surprising that we get frustrated when treating a bird for parasites, that we have to withhold eggs from being eaten. Naturally, it's a great benefit to have a worming product that has a zero withhold that lets us keep all those eggs. However, it's important to realize that many chemicals have properties that limit how it can be given. For example, tablets, liquid, or in-feed formulations all exist to serve specific functions in the farming sector. Farm chickens or other poultry require medication to be given via drinking water or in the feed. And these options aren't always the best for the small flock, as water is often not able to be controlled, so you can't ensure the right dose. And in-feed options, where they manufacture the medication directly into the pellet, do not provide sufficient dosing, as most of the powders have to be added on top of pre-existing pellets. It has been seen in practice that sprinkling in-feed wormers such as flubanol onto these pellets, or even hand mixing them with oil onto pellets, doesn't achieve the concentration needed to be effective. But because the chooks are not checked for worms using a fecal egg count, the worm burden is often missed. Getting routine fecal egg counts done, perhaps 2 to 3 times a year, is the best option. Having a look before going into fall, before coming into lay, usually the late winter, or at least a month or 2 after you worm your bird or your flock. Worm with a product that you can ensure proper dosing. Ensuring that the worms are removed trumps a zero egg withhold every time. Make sure if you choose a worming agent that goes in the water that it can be the only source of drinking water for your flock. This may mean keeping them in a run to restrict their water choices. Tablet wormers are the best for smaller flocks to ensure that the correct dose is given, and they are easily administered for a small flock. However, each circumstance needs its own plan, and doing a worm count helps determine which active, which wormer, would be the most appropriate. Worming prophylactically is not ideal, but if you are going to do this method, then there are some rules to follow. 1. Rotate the worming chemical you use every year. Switching the active ingredient helps minimize resistance. 2. Treat at least twice a year. Early spring and in the autumn are probably best. Getting worming done before they start to lay eggs and prior to winter molt both give your birds the best start to those seasons. And it's important to remember that when you do treat for worms, that it is a 2 treatment process, usually 10 to 14 days apart between the 2 treatments. 3. Hygiene. Clean the coop regularly. Elbow grease and hard work are the main tool you have to keeping worm challenges at bay. But a coop that is easy to clean or a run that is easy to clean is also a great idea.